Hello, today we are here with Grant and Matt. They are the co-founders of an interesting startups in payments from the UK. The startup name is Tytonical. Tytonical is effectively an amazing solution because when I saw them for the first time, I've been stunned because they can effectively solve the problem of the payments without the need of stay in queue or actually spending a lot of time. And also in this period, they are effectively solving the problem of safety. Nowadays, payments are probably the biggest bucket of investments in the fintech. So I invited you because I just wanted to ask you, how do you see the trends in this industry? And if you see also the possible relationships with retail, because they go hand in hand. And also, if your solutions are working also in other industries. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Betty. Yeah, I think that the trends that we see are that experience trumps everything. You just have to look at Apple Pay, and before that, contactless. And in fact, it's hardly even an emerging trend. It's rather something that's almost smacked us right in the face. If you deliver a truly effortless experience, then end users will be quick to adopt your solution. So, I mean, it's so simple, yet so few companies get it right. And in fact, by extension, those experiences lead to the rise of super apps. And I suppose that's another trend, is the rise of super apps. And these are these apps that can do so many more things than just one particular function. In fact, that's an area where we play into, because we look to enable super apps with our technology. We don't want to be the end consumer experience. That's very expensive. But we do want to allow existing apps to offer killer payment experiences, specifically for drivers. So if the old analogy is, in a gold rush, sell shovels, as you mentioned before, it's a big investment bucket. So the gold rush is for payments, and we sell friction user experience shovels. But this is not supposed to be a Tytonical pitch. The emerging trends for us are user experience, as we mentioned. Then, of course, regulation, PSD2, open banking. Those feel like they've been emerging trends for half a decade already. And then finally, cost. You mentioned at the very beginning, saying that digital payments is the largest investment bucket for fintech. And sure, there's still plenty of scope for growth as the world shifts from cash to digital, and that's what's driving the valuations. But I think that pure play payment processing is just a race to the bottom. So if I thought there were three trends, I'd say it's user experience, regulation, bit of a boring answer, but it's true, and then cost.
Okay, thank you.
And let me challenge you a bit on that, because I agree overall with your stance, but on the other hand, payment processing per se, it's clearly a commodity. It's going to be a commodity, especially on the digital side. Larger the volume, smaller the unit cost, everybody's happy, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there is a lot of payment processing entities which are moving beyond that. I think of Clara in Sweden, which is developing quite nicely everywhere else in Europe. They started as payment processing, and now they're taking a credit risk on one side, and they're lending on the other. They are helping with the working capital, the merchants. So they are evolving beyond that. On the other hand, if you look at China, the big transaction and payment companies are basically subsidiaries, of course, of large tech companies, but also of large, let's say, commercial platforms. Tencent, Alipay, Alibaba, and so on and so forth. So what do you see your role? Because I understand that you guys provide a piece of the puzzle, and I think it's very smart, because you don't want to bring everything to the table and you want to focus. But the industry is also evolving. It's getting pulled in different directions.
Yeah, and I think that trend for like, as you say, payment processes to evolve, I think that's almost totally reactionary. They either need to capture or defend market share. And so, I mean, as technology companies and as a technology company, we know that white space. So that's where an unmet or unarticulated need is uncovered, where you can create innovation opportunities. That white space is either your biggest opportunity or your biggest threat. And so moving into those areas, either up or down the value chain, that is almost table stakes for many players, especially those in, as you say, highly commoditized areas like payment processing. So I think that, yes, there's a trend that's reshaping the industry, especially for generalists, but there probably is still a space, and I'd argue there's a demand for highly specialized players within payment processing. Your question around big players, doing many things is also a trend that's set to continue.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to ask you if you can give a brief overview of your vision regarding the opportunities you can have with apps or what you do, because in the end it's not a pitch, but let's just the people can understand what you do.
No problem, Betty. And as with all startups, we love to talk about our vision. So I'm happy to take this one. So our vision is to allow all drivers of all cars to access connected car payment experiences. And we want that to be regardless of the make and model of your car. We don't want you to have the latest BMW to experience these frictionless payment experiences, which is exactly what the Tytonical platform enables. As you quite rightly mentioned, we do work with other partner apps, so existing apps that are out there that drivers already use to pay for things like parking. And we enable those users who already pay for parking on these apps to pay for things like fuel, drive-through, food and beverage, and tolls, for example. Those experiences can all be accessed from the Tytonical experience with an existing parking app, and all from the comfort of their own vehicle without having to reach for their wallet. And so far, we have signed 4 of the world's leading parking apps. And we have contracts with them that allow us exclusivity for payments outside of parking as part of our network. And every single one of those drivers that has one of those apps, and there are 38 million of those drivers globally, they already have their bank card and their license plate registered with their account. So all we require for them is to opt in by toggling yes, and then they have access to all those other beautiful payment experiences outside of parking that is still related to the vehicle, like fuel, drive-throughs, and tolls.
That's amazing, because you can solve also the problem of the management of privacy and all the regulations behind.
Exactly. Absolutely.
On that, when we think about the future of mobility, particularly in the context of smart cities, I think that part of the problem for the automation of services, the data sharing, and so on and so forth, that smart city services define, is that the service providers are usually not necessarily used to faster, better, more secure payment technologies. So what role do you think you can play in shared bikes, shared mopeds, shared scooters, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot of data flying around in smart city mobilities, and no one's figured out how to utilize that data yet. There's so much of it there. You can get so much information now from ANPR cameras that exist out there, sensors that exist on the street, in order to facilitate payments as well. And there's always the link. So smart cities are all geared around providing the final, as you rightly put it, the last couple of miles into the city centre, with things like with bikes, with park and ride in the UK, and also I know there are trials certainly around Hounslow and Heathrow, where they're looking at putting driverless vehicles in for that last couple of miles into the city centre. So the journey will stop in the future, in line with the smart city technology that's been released, will stop around a mile or two from the city centre. Cars will park there, and they'll then be able to take whatever mode of transport that's sustainable, economically sustainable, to the city centre in the end. So where do we fit in? That's a good question. We provide frictionless payment experiences for everything up until that last mile. So what we do end up doing is reducing queuing and reducing idling time at the fuel station. So from the environment, we add value there, and we reduce emissions in that area. In terms of the final mile or two, we've not found a fit there yet, but we certainly have some ideas for the future. We're going to keep those under wrap for now because we don't want to give too much away. But we're certainly focusing on fuel as our beachhead at the start.
Cool. Can you tell a bit more about your technology? What you could tell in a pitch where a guy hasn't signed an NDA yet, of course.
Yeah, of course, no problem. And but our technology is really what sets us aside from the competition, apart from our scale. So we have. Our ANPR camera technology is 1,000 times more accurate than what currently exists on the market. And like you said, I can't go into too much detail, but the main reason for that is that we are able to use the geolocation of the app user in conjunction with several other algorithms that allow us to give a three-way match between the location, the account data, and the ANPR camera read on site, which gives us an incredibly high accuracy. And what that enables us to do is facilitate much higher value payment experiences, which is something that other people aren't actually able to automate at the moment. ANPR is reserved for things like enforcement and parking and low value transactions, which don't have to be the be all and end all. If you get the vehicle registration wrong, you don't have to give them a fine. If you get the vehicle registration wrong in parking, you might lose maybe £2 or £3 worth of revenue, only if they haven't paid. But what you can't do is automate a payment at the fuel pump where someone drives away having not paid for £60 worth or €70 worth of fuel. And that's exactly where our technology gives us the edge. And if you combine that with our scale, with our 38 million drivers that will have access to that technology across the globe, as well as our ubiquity. So one thing we've not mentioned here is a lot of the fuel retailers themselves already tried to release apps in the market. And what the issue that users have with those apps is that they're all assigned to individual brands. So, for example, to pay at a BP station, I need a BP app. To pay at a Shell station, I need a Shell app. But there's no app out there that you can use on multiple stations at scale. And we have 15 times the amount of users than the largest fuel app. So we're making good progress.
And do you know that, for instance, in Italy and in other countries, there is a rise in digital payments, and there are also the programs to push and to increase the use of digital payments with loyalty programs that can recognize you the credits and points, discounts. So that could be a driver for your development in other countries as well.
Absolutely, and you know, it's quite poignant. I think the timing of our product being released and being around the COVID crisis and everything you just mentioned, I think, has sort of facilitated that need in the public domain. So the tragedy of the COVID crisis and the global pandemic that everyone's experiencing at the moment, as you quite rightly point out, the need to be digitalized is even more crucial than it ever was before. And the motivation was there anyway, as you point out, with loyalty. Now it's more than just loyalty, it's a matter of health and safety. And anything that we can do to reduce contact at the pumps and with payment methods, then that's something which we would, you know, as a happy outcome that we have with our product in a very stark and negative situation. So we feel like digitalized payments, particularly at the fuel pump, where, you know, there's a small shop often near quite a busy point of use. So we feel like we add a lot of value there, and we certainly feel like we've come along at the right time to reduce that contact that exists.
In terms of, let's say, one aspect which I think it's very important when we talk about, you know, Industry 4.0 and digitalization of payments, is the fact that there is a convergence between industries which traditionally were really far away and far apart, and they start overlapping. So in terms of, you know, insurance, fleet management, even OEM suppliers, you know, now they are data producers, data gatherers, data miners, and they want to use all this data. So how do you play and how do you fit? Because of course, with what you process, you have a very good understanding of, you know, consumption partner probably, so real cost of fuel and so on and so forth. So how do you fit in this emerging data center, automotive industry?
Well, I think, you know, in terms of where we fit, the anonymized data is big, and it's a sort of well-trodden ground to a certain extent. But what hasn't been realized really is, and I don't think has been maximized, is what you use that data for. And as Grant alluded to in his previous questions, user experience, we feel, is where the gap in the market lies. And if we can use data to improve user experience by, for example, tracking where people drive and then telling them where the best place to fuel is, and when the best time of day to fuel is, and maybe we offer them an incentive to go to that fuel station at that time because of the fact that we know that it's quiet at that time, so we'd rather they fill up their car then. That's where we feel that we fit in. We feel like we're going to utilize data that is already there in abundance in the market, that everyone has access to. You know, we have access to the same data that the parking app companies will and the fuel stations will, but we're going to utilize that for user experience.
Yeah, and if I can add to what Matt's saying there, I mean, just having the data, you know, there's some very real reasons why regulation around GDPR came into play, and that was because people were using consumer data incorrectly. Well, let's just say, we won't say anything further than just say that they were using it incorrectly. And in fact, Tytonical as a business was born out of the idea of being able to take some of this data and make it work for the consumer, so that the consumer had agency over that data. As we built the business, we realized that we were able to be more effective by focusing on user experiences, as Matt says. And so it's the utility of the data that has value for us, rather than just knowing the where, whens, and hows. if people want to try and make money out of user data around, mining the data, that's for their business. We're very much about ensuring that the consumer gets the absolute best experience, because that's ultimately where we are going to avoid any issues around privacy and regulation. Because in this day and age, that is something that we can't even flirt with danger there.
Absolutely, and I think an analogy that I like to use is other companies that sell, try and sell mass data that's anonymized. They're selling the ingredients to a cake to other people to try and make a cake with. We take the ingredients from the consumer, we bake it into a cake, and then we sell it back to them.
Yeah, because sometimes the cake is radioactive by means and purposes.
I have a question on financials, because when you try to compete with the big conglomerates, it's obvious that commercially they try to scale up, selling more services. You just have one service. So what is your value proposition in this case? Because you can certainly be integrated internally and not externally for a partner.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, this alludes to what we were talking about earlier about the rise of super apps and where we play. And I suppose just as a startup, operating in the same sphere as the big boys is actually quite exhilarating and very validating for us, because, I mean, as you know, many startups, just knowing that we are on the right track is half the battle. So, and of course, as the members of the team, we have worked with those traditional players, those big boys. And so we've seen firsthand all the reasons why Tytonical can be successful. In fact, there's a fantastic precedent that's effectively been set of large organizations trying to compete with startups rather than startups trying to compete with large organizations. So obviously, and the one that springs to mind is Square, where, and in fact, one of the co-founders of Square, Jim McKelvey, he wrote a book called The Innovation Stack. It's a fantastic book. I'd encourage everyone to check it out. But he tells the story of when Square first launched their original dongle, the one that plugged into the headphone jack and you could swipe your card. Soon after they launched that, Amazon launched their own dongle. I think it was called Register or something like that. And it was something like 30% of the price. It offered full online customer support. Now, if you're a startup like Square and Amazon comes and does the same thing you're doing, I mean, as you can imagine, that must be terrible news. And obviously in his book, Jim McKelvey tells a better story, but I'll cut the long story short, is that eventually Amazon pulled their product from the market. And they then, to make up, obviously they then disappointed all their customers. And so they sent all of their customers a Square dongle to say sorry. And so it was a fantastic coup. And the lesson to take from the story is that as startups, we have the ability to quickly deploy an innovation stack to service customers at a speed which those big boys can't compete. So as you say, whilst we can't outspend them, we can absolutely out-innovate them. Because as we know, our customers don't necessarily want the cheapest solution. They want the solution that solves their needs the best. That's what we're doing with Tytonical. That innovation stack that we're building, whilst it, as you say, we focus on just one thing, but we're going to be the absolute best at just that one thing. And that's what I think that all of those big traditional players, they don't stand a chance, really.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, even though we're a startup, we do have access to 38 million drivers, as we mentioned before, and they all have their license plate and their payment details associated with their account. And in order for someone to compete against us, they'd need to have 38 million drivers or similar numbers with their license plate and payment details attached. Furthermore, we have our patent pending ANPR camera technology. So even though we're a startup and we're very disruptive, as Grant said, we can move quickly. We also have quite a big defensive moat as well for a small company like ourselves.
And I agree with you that, at the end of the day, innovation, it's the only thing you guys should really think about basically all the time, because that's how you survive and thrive, by the way. So in terms of innovation, and of course, I don't want to have, the details on the technological side, but what do you think it's going to be your focus in the next 3 to 5 years, given all that we know about, the pandemic, about what's happening, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, our roadmap is fairly clear. We, as Matt mentioned, our fuel is our beachhead, and as we move forward, we will then look to leverage our core technology, which is the identification of consumers or the identification of drivers, really, and we'll move into other verticals. So that'll be then tolls, drive-throughs, food and beverage, because what we want to do is having got consumers using our partner applications at the fuel pump, we're looking to now build that trust with the consumer that says, here is a solution that delivers a frictionless experience, and it works at the petrol pump. You can now use the same experience and it'll work at the drive-through, at the toll, so that we can then build that trust. Because whilst the temptation is to throw technology at problems, and in fact, that's what we've seen with a lot of our competitors, is that they're very much focused at putting technology either into the car, or they'll either put a little dongle in the onboard diagnostic port, the OBD2 port, or they will plug something into the radio. All of these gadgets don't scale. Matt mentioned, we've got 38 million drivers within our network, and all you need is a license plate. So what we will do is that in those next 3 to 5 years, we'll leverage everything that we can around the license plate. And at some point, whilst we've then curated the trust from the consumer, we'll then be in that we will have earned the trust of the consumer, and we will have earned the right to potentially leave the vehicle and look at other ways to leverage our core technology, which is around identification of consumers. And it may not be the license plate, it could be facial recognition, biometrics, whatever the story may be. And we can partner with experts in those fields. But ultimately, what we will look to do is we'll take the trust from our core value proposition. We'll take that trust and we'll then move it into other verticals. And for now, it'll be focused around the car, and in the future, we'll look to leave the car.
And with regards to the focus on the car, I read recently that the UK is actually the first country where there are more electric vehicle charging stations than fuel stations already. So do you have a plan to bridge in that direction as well? Or is it a completely different business model, or it's not interesting? Or are you too fuel dependent?
That's a good question. I mean, we do have the capability to work in EV charging, and there will be the opportunity to apply the same user identification technology in certain scenarios that help some of the more established and better known EV charging companies. They are still in terms of vehicles on the road. Electric vehicles still make up a very, very, very small portion of all the total cars on the road in the UK. So there's still a very small market segment. Although it is growing, it's certainly growing. There's the potential for disruption around hydrogen fuel cell technology as well, which could play into our hands. But at the moment, we focus on fuel, and then we will back the winning horse when it comes to the eco-friendly race. And in terms of fuel as well, The largest growing market at the moment in terms of purchase of vehicles is not the electric vehicle market. It's actually the hybrid market, and those cars still need to fill up. So we've got some data that shows at around 2036, that's when the sale of fuel in Europe slows down. So that's when it peaks. So until 2036, more and more fuel was set to be sold for light vehicles that are used for standard use.
But anyway, I invite you to avoid to under-evaluate this situation about electric cars because the latest weekend in Milan, there had been the presentation of the latest Citroën, and the cost is 5,500 euros. So I expect that all the young millennials and Generation X, Z are trying now to save money because they want this cool car. It's very easy to park. It's very, very small, and it's probably smaller than a Smart. And there are also already in place projects to lease them for 20 euro per week. So I expect that recharging stations will grow exponentially in the upcoming years.
And if I may add to that, I was recently speaking at an automotive conference. Virtually speaking, so it was a virtual conference out of Turkey. It's the third year in a row that I do it. And as preparation, I talked to a lot of players in the industries, OEM, automotive, fleet, and so on and so forth. And basically, what they told me is that one of the byproducts of the pandemic is the fact that a lot of money which was allocated to autonomous vehicle technology, it's actually being shifted towards electrical vehicles. Because they realized, they follow consumer sentiment, okay? And they thought one was the cool technology to invest, and to keep, but they suddenly realized that actually electrical vehicles are definitely more relevant and more important and more beneficial in their portfolio. But again, I like your approach as well in the sense that you have a winner, you know that that's the horse you're riding, and then new horses are coming, and then you'll be ready to jump when there is certain critical mass in that sense, because as well of your approach. So I think it makes completely sense from a strategic point of view.
Exactly. We need to get users first, and we need to get people using the service first. And the quickest way to do that at scale is in fuel. Once we have those users, and once we've got people on board and people are paying, we can then, as you repeated, we can back the winning horse then.
And it's interesting that you say about the shift to electric. I think that the takeaway from what you've mentioned there is probably less about a shift to electric and more about a shift away from a sharing economy. Given the current COVID crisis, is that beforehand, being able to just share cars and all of those sort of things wasn't a problem. Obviously, as you say, customer sentiment is going to be moving away from those sort of things, and personal vehicle ownership is probably back on the rise. And then the consideration for a consumer at that point is, do I buy a fossil fuel car, a dirty car, or do I buy an electric vehicle? And that's the decision that people are making currently. I think that whilst electric continues to be the as you say, it's the sexy option. As Matt says, the data suggests is that whilst electric is definitely growing, it's not even keeping pace with traditional fuel. And so the horse that we'll back is traditional fuels because that's where the scale is. And that then gives us permission to shift into any other sector or vertical that we want.
Yeah. Going back to the pump station, because pump stations are, of course, refueling, but not only. They're also extremely important retail and restaurant businesses. I think actually the largest retail chain in the Netherlands, it's actually Shell, because of their pump stations. So do you tap into that as well? Do you have plans into integrating in that side business? Is it them in terms of next verticals?
Absolutely, and we're already looking to offer services that drive people into the stores at the right time. So, for example, knowing the consumer behaviour, as we mentioned before, allows us to influence when and where that person goes. But it also we can offer discounts for things in store to get them to the pump at the right time. So one of the things, a very exciting thing we're looking at doing is working with a dynamic pricing company that will tap into the stock control system. We're going to integrate with them, and they will know the value of each of the perishable goods in the store, so that they can offer appropriate discounts in line with the actual value of the food at the time that person is required to go and refuel. So it sounds very complicated, but in real terms, when you're driving to a shop, driving past a fuel station, we might see that you drive past it at 4 p.m. Every day, and that's the quiet time. We want you to go in at that time because it is quiet. We'd also quite like you to go into the shop. So what we say to you is, if you go now, there's a free coffee and a free donut there for you. So then you go to the store, you fill up, so you use it at the right time when it's quiet. You then also go into the store, you get your free donut, your free coffee, and then you might pick up a paper or a packet of biscuits or something like that, just to pay just while you're there for convenience. So we will drive people into the store, but more importantly, we'll drive them into the store at the correct time of day, which is something that they don't have control over at the moment. So yeah, we are, to answer your question, yes, we are looking to add value in those areas.
This is very interesting. So right now there was a solution where you get the invitation to go to the cafeteria or other business nearby through the ticket. So you now are able to invite the consumers at the right time when the business nearby wants to do a promotion. This is a very, very interesting news that you are giving to our public. Thank you.
And I think that there is also a component of sustainability, because dynamic pricing, as you mentioned, if it can be linked to the perishability of groceries in the stores, that's a big saving for the retailers.
Exactly.
But it's also, for all of us, it's less waste, less food waste in general. With tons of it gets thrown every day away. So it would be really a great solution.
Exactly, and there's a phrase we like at Tytonical called goal alignment, and we feel that solution aligns many goals for many different stakeholders. The consumer, the retailer, just society in general. The government. So, yeah, when we're talking about a mass scale with 38 million drivers, it really can make a big impact.
So, one last question from me: what keeps you awake at night?
My children.
Yeah, 3 as well here.
Same here.
I think that certainly, and I'm sure between Matt and I, we probably have our own concerns. I think the key thing that what keeps me awake at night is that is that that the consumer behavior will it's the unknown unknowns. At the moment, we know that consumers are going to continue to use their vehicles, and that's going to be growing for the next 15 years. We know that consumers will happily use a solution like ours at the fuel pump. And all of that stuff now is very much known. What we don't know, and if COVID has taught us anything, is that things can change very quickly. And fortunately, as a small business, we are able to adapt to those changes. But I suppose it's the unknown unknowns. That's what keeps me awake. That's what keeps my mind going to think, what are we missing? What aren't we thinking? What can we anticipate? So for now, we feel like we've got a handle on everything, but we certainly know that we can't rest on our laurels, and so that's probably what keeps me awake at the moment.
And I have one thing that keeps me awake at night, and that is I want to move quicker than the big companies will allow us to. So although we're making great strides and great progress, working with the larger companies that we have to work with to get the kind of scale that we need takes a bit longer than a small startup that's very enthusiastic and keen to get things moving, as ourselves are. So it's natural, but that's what keeps me awake at night. I want it to happen now, not in 2 months' time.
Yeah. Betty?
I don't have other question, honestly. And I'm sorry, I apologize for what I did today.
Oh, no problem. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Filiberto, we didn't hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I have then one last question with regards to what Matt was just saying, because I once did a project with a consumer electronic company before IoT was IoT, so 15 years ago, and they were building integrated technology with a large sport fashion brand. And the two of them really had a completely different definition of speed. The fashion brand had this idea of, okay, every 6 months they had to produce a new collection. So a month was really a very long-term planning because it was half of a sixth, almost 20% of the life cycle of a collection. Whereas the consumer electronic company, which was more of a capital-intensive, one product a year type of company, had a completely different notion of speed. So, in your context, how speed is an opportunity or a problem working with large organizations?
Well, yeah, exactly that. I think it's both. I think it's an opportunity because we're obviously able to innovate quickly and come up with new ideas and prove them like we have done very, very quickly. But it's sometimes it's the nature of the beast. It's tricky when you're working with large organizations because they're naturally going to be slower. They're a big cruise ship and we're a speedboat. So we want to turn and go quickly, and they're going to take a couple of weeks, months to turn the boat, to come with us. So it's all very natural and it's all good. It's all fine. You have to be patient if you're working with larger organizations, but the reward is much bigger for both organizations. Both organizations benefit massively from that patience happening. So even though it keeps me awake at night, it's not a worry. It's just excitement and enthusiasm that keeps me awake rather than worry.
Cool. Grant, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, the bonus is that it allows us to do a lot more, actually, because we are waiting for other people to schedule meetings, internal meetings, and get internal sign-offs. And what it allows us to do is that rather than sitting on our hands and waiting, we just build more. We innovate more. We come up with new things. We are able to rapidly validate our ideas. And so what it has meant is that whilst we are 100% focused on our core proposition and delivering those ideas, everything is set in motion to deliver that. And whilst we are waiting for traditional players to do what they need to do, it means that we can come up with, some of the most incredible things that allow. I mean, we've probably come up with 3 new revenue streams whilst we wait for some of our partners to have one meeting. So yeah, it's both a blessing and a curse, but it's certainly, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Cool. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. Betty, thank you for introducing us to Tytonical. And good luck with everything. We'll try to talk to you back again sometime soon.
Thank you very much for your time,
Thank
guys.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, guys.